Okay. Today we're gonna paint a portrait of a young girl, and what's special about this portrait is it's a really dramatic light, a chiaroscuro light. So we're gonna try to explore today how to paint a very dramatic light conditions. So I have a little bit of my drawing sketching already with a pencil. If you like to do that, you can, or if you want to go directly to your board with the brush, that's fine too. So I'm just looking, getting the portrait sketching with my brush, the movement of the hair, the movement of the color coming down, and of course just kind of the egg shape of the face, the chin box, the face coming around, and then the neck. Okay, so very generally big shapes, not worrying about so much details yet. And then the eyes will be somewhere here, the eyebrow will be somewhere here, the edge of the nose with the cast shadow will be somewhere here, and then the ends of the mouth, the corners of the mouth somewhere here, and then the mouth somewhere here. So let's start by defining, and I'm using transparent red oxide so far, defining the light and shadow shapes. So I'm looking at the shadow shape, how it streams across her head. There's a little bit of the fold of the lock of the hair falling down on the ankle, and then the rest of the hair is hugging her head, her forehead, over the cheek to the side of the neck. So all of this will be in shadow except this lock of blonde hair that come to the light. And then the shadow, from the shadow shape of the hair, we're gonna define the temple and then come down to the lower eyelid, put the whole eyeball in the shadow with the bottom eyelid, come around the eyeball, come up a little bit higher to the cheekbone, and at the same time I'm going to kind of just block the shadow shape, and then come around the cheekbone, down the cheek, over the mouthpiece, around the box of the chin, on the plane of the box of the chin, and the cast shadow of the head over the neck. So this is one solid shadow shape, and I'm just slightly colorizing it in one tonality of transparent red oxide. If we come around to the other side of the face, we'll find a little shadow shape to the right hand facing planes. So here and on the plane of the nostril of the nose, the low plane of the lips, the underplane from the lips, cast shadow on the top of the chin box and around the mouth, around the lips, and then just shortly starting on, not quite reaching the side plane of the chin here. And then also the right hand side facing plane of the bottom of the eyebrow and the nose bridge and the side plane of the nose, which feels a very slight shadow which has been washed out by the light coming across this area. So we're going to wash out eventually. But that's, I think, pretty much all our shadow shape. There will be a little bit here. And then we can block the clothing also as the darkness. So in one kind of a flow of darkness. Okay. And then let's make this a little bit more defined. Okay. And so that's also the underplane of the hair here is in shadow as well. So before we repaint the shadow shape, let's start by just placing a little color for the background. And the choice of my color will be just slightly different from the reference because I want to get a little bit more on a greener side rather than violet. So I'm going to take just any black that you have, ivory or lamp black will do, and then take a little bit of cadmium yellow deep, mix into the black, and then with a little bit of any red you have, bring that, and then if it gotten too brown, I'm gonna mix a little bit of my black again, or you can mix a little ultramarine and then a little bit more yellow. Let's see what this is. I'm looking for something dark, but a little bit more in a greener family. And then I'm just, yeah, I'm okay with that color. And then I'm just gonna come to my shapes, and I don't want to completely finish it and make it absolutely flat. So I'm gonna just bring that color around on the right hand, left hand side panel or canvas. And I want to make it a little bit more sketchy or unfinished look because nothing in the painting at this point is finished. And so it's, I want the background have a feeling of being unfinished, so I will know that after I finish or get close to the completing the painting, I need to get back into finishing of the background. So that would be good. And then I'm gonna get a little bit more transparent red oxide with a little bit more of ultramarine. I'm gonna bring a little bit stronger darks, that dividing triangle between the lock of the blonde hair and the cheek. And as well, I can just take a little bit of medium and again in kind of a unfinished matter, bring a little bit of more darkness to the clothing. So when I judge my light, it will come against that darkness. Okay, something like that. And I'm connecting the darkness of the color into that triangle of the darkness. And maybe even bringing that darkness a little bit to the side plane as well, even though it does have a little bit more green to it. We can put some of our background color into that color as well. Okay. And so at this point, I kind of took care of everything that to me represents background. And the background is the hair, the neck, the ears if they're present, and the clothing. So, and of course the shadow shape. And I'm gonna come back to my shadow shape and fill it up with a mix for my shadow shape. And I'm gonna use what I've already have, my transparent red oxide with a little bit of ultramarine. And I'm gonna introduce a little bit more yellow into it. And I'm gonna get a little, any earth reds is fine. So, and getting kind of a darker shadow shape. And then without concern about reflective light, let me just double check. I don't want to go much darker. Yeah, something like this, maybe a little bit more red, just a little bit more red, so it's not as green. That would be fine. So right now, I'm fully aware that I'm going slightly darker than some of the areas but of my shadow. And the reason for that, because those areas are affected by reflective light. And so it's not the first light source, it's a secondary light source that comes and kind of changes the initial shadow shape, changes the value of it by warming it up and lightening. But in the beginning, all the shadow shape on this side of the face is equally dark and the same. And then what happens to it later is what we do later. So we kind of are following the way the light operates. First, there is an absence of light, and I'm just gonna change this direction so you don't get a lot of glare from my brush strokes. I'm leaving my shadows nice and flat and feeling the same. And the same with the shadow over the nose, with the cast shadow under the nose, all as one unit. And I'm gonna do a little bit of darkening here. And these shadows are slightly different story because they are the same value, but because they're in such light environment that they've been affected quite significantly. And if I start too dark, it will be too muddy by the time I get to the right value. So I'm gonna paint them a little bit lighter. That's too dark. And then the low, paint my shapes, kind of a mark the shapes of the low, upper eye lip, and then here it is. Okay, and then what I'll do is, in fact, I think just to frame the light of the face, I'm gonna go a little bit back away to the light of the hair, take a little bit more yellow into my mixture of the background, and maybe even yellow ochre, and even, let me see if I need a little bit of white. And then just paint the shape of the light of the hair. And that's just to take away all that extra light of that was left on the plane of my board. Okay, and then it gets so dark, and then right here it will get light, but I think it's okay. We can maybe just connect a little bit the darkness of this hair and put a little bit darker hair on the back. Okay. So notice how this edge is very soft edge and lost. This edge is very soft and lost. And this edge is very soft and lost. So I'm kind of just passing through them a little bit and making them less visible and more lost or softer. Okay, and now we have our what one can call a roadmap of shadow shapes and the background and our light shape. And so what we're gonna start with is by cutting this a little more, is by painting the flow of light. That's truly the fun part of this painting. So depending on the size that you chose to paint your model, make sure that your brush size fits. If your brush is too small, you have too many small brush strokes. So for me, it's either size 4 or minimum size 3. You can go even bigger if you want. And then when we get to smaller planes and details, we can switch to a smaller brush. But I'm gonna start by using my transparent white, even though it feels quite opaque. And then let's talk a little bit about coloration, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna reinterpret the color scheme that we see on the photograph to our own kind of a feeling of that skin. But the main idea is that we're gonna paint the flow of light with the light coming over her hair, floating down her chin, floating down her upper eyelid into the eyeball, into lower lid, picking up on the cheek and floating down the cheekbone into the mouth and around the chin box into the top of the box, and then sliding itself into the sliver of the light of the neck, and then maybe bouncing back into the shoulder and into the hair. So it is this continuity of light that will kind of drive every decision that we make about the colors, color tones, and the values of that portrait. So I'm gonna take the white and I'm gonna take cadmium red medium. I'm gonna add a little bit to the side of it and create a little bit of a pink. I'm also gonna take a little bit of a yellow, whatever you have, Naples yellow or yellow lemon or light is fine as well, and add on another side of that. And you can take a little bit of yellow ochre as well. That will give you a little bit more yellow skin tone. And then to the side, I'm going to make us just slight marks of green and violet. And then I'm going to mix them in slightly into the red. I'm going to take that and I'm going to place a little colored notes under my eyes, probably a little bit on the merge of the shadows. We can make it even a little bit more violet. Where else we can put those? Yeah, let's put them somewhere here, somewhere here. We'll see. Let's just bring a little bit of color into this, a little bit on the corners, not that corner, a little bit next to shadow. Okay. And then I'm going to take my strong light, add just a little more color and a little bit more pink, but it will be kind of a colorless, almost colorless, not a lot of pink into that. And start from a light edge of the forehead here and move across the forehead. And move with the form. Okay. Add a little bit more pink, add a little bit more yellow. Then stream down the forehead. In fact, I still want to add tiny bit of color. I might have made a mistake and instead of transparent white, grab titanium. So it's kind of a little bit stronger than I intended. A little more washed away. So I might go with just a tiny bit more color. Okay. And then I'm gonna come more across the forehead. So that is a very lit up forehead. So just want to paint the strongest light. And then I'm going to put that strong light on the meeting place of this plane with this plane. So that would be my strong light. And then another strong light on the bottom, on the top of the muzzle and across. And then another strong light on the top of the chin in a smaller size. And then coming back to forehead, as the forehead comes to the eyebrows, it becomes a little bit redder. So I'm going to bring a little bit of more warmer color next to this plane, and then the opposite symmetrical plane on the opposite side here, and stretch it. And then bring it across together into the light of that forehead. And then I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre and drive the yellow ochre into the blue that we kind of pre-painted in a way. Okay. And then this side of the forehead isn't coming to the shadow side. So the light, the strong light that starts from light side here and travels across becomes a little bit more tired and loses its strength. So I'm bringing a little bit more warmth to it and coming to more of a side plane, as well as just giving a little bit of a cast shadow from the hair and softening the line of the hair. And then driving it down to the eyebrow and merging it into my bluish tonality that will represent a side plane. And I can even pick a little bit of the background color of green and come to my shadow shape and just bring a little bit of that into the merging place between the light and the shadow without moving shadow too far away. In fact, leaving the shadow in its place. So I'm gonna just double check what happens here, and I think what I'm gonna do is just slightly bring a little bit more color to the bottom of moving to that side plane, and then a little bit just taking that light out with just a little movement of the brush and opening the edge to the hair. And bringing a little bit warmer temperature paint, a little bit, no, that's too pink, maybe just a little bit more desaturated pink, traveling into the opening. And taking a little bit more yellow ochre, doesn't matter, and just taking the light of the forehead and pushing and moving into the hair like this. So again, we are looking for the ways to open the edges of that forehead so it has a kind of a feel of moving, being closed and open, closed and open. Okay. If I feel that I went too light, I can very easily bring more color into my skin tone. But sometimes if I feel like I went too much color, it's harder for me to bring back the sense of light. So in a way, I'm usually rather go a little bit more light and make it feel more lit up, and then add the color and make it less lit up. Then the other way is trying to chase the light. Okay, let's come to the end of the nose. We'll mix a little bit more pink. And we'll start from the end of the nose, the most protruded part, the bowl of the nose. That is a little pinker, especially as it moves to meet the shadow shape. And then as it moves from cartridge, to the bone of this skull, the nose plane. It becomes a little more colorless. The skin here is tightly pushed against the bone, so it doesn't have as many blood vessel, and it's a harder surface, so the light reflects a lot easier from it. So that's why the coloration of red is more visible on the bone, on the softer part of the nose, than the harder, bony part of the nose. And then the side plane of the nose gets warmer in preparation of dropping through the shadow and washing away that side plane shadow. So what happens here is truly that the light is streaming down from the bone of the nose down, as well as it's coming from this side down. So you can almost paint it as if it was a bridge across. And then later with more highlight, you can push the nose back into the front, but lose the edges, the definition of the nose. So we can sculpt a little bit of it back again by bringing maybe a little more color here and a little bit more gray or violet on the side plane of that nose, and so forth. But we avoid the downfall of painting between the outlines. Rather, we break through them and then we find it back again. So let's put just slightly little bit of a tonality for our eyebrow shape. Notice that this eyebrow on the left hand side is next to the light. It's really lit up, so don't paint it too much of a darker value, because light is able to pass through it in pretty much all of it except the bottom plane of it. So the darkest dark of that eyebrow would be right here, sitting on the bone in the underplane, while the top of that eyebrow will be fully lit up right here and moving back and being lit up with the light around it. So, and then what happens is the swelling of this upper eyelid, and sorry, it is kind of a also flashier part of our anatomy, so we're gonna give it a little more pinker color, arch. And as it moves towards the nose plane, it does get into the shadow. But that shadow is somewhat very washed out by all the lights around it. So we can't use this heavy value on it. And then with a little bit of red, I'm gonna just swish that red through the eyeball at the beginning of the eye. And I'm gonna do a little bit of, pick up a little bit of that gray green and put a little bit on the turn of that arch. And bring that together all the way to the upper eyelid. So then with a little bit more light, which could be just white with a little bit more, just a slight red into it, I'm gonna light up the flow of that light passing through the middle of that eyelid right here. I think again it's a little bit too light, so I'm gonna push that down slightly and bring a little bit more. That's too blue. Gonna get just slightly. Okay. And then with more yellow light, I'm gonna go behind that arch and paint the starting edge of the cheekbone. Right here, just to begin with. Okay, and then I'm just gonna take a little bit detour and paint the detail of that eye. So I'm gonna take a smaller brush, take a little bit of that transparent red oxide, and just mark the edge of the eyelash. And then take a little bit of more warmer red and cut into just slightly owl light, forming or kind of a defining the upper eyelid. And then just so I put a little bit more shadow shape on the top of it, like this. And then with my bluish greenish tone, I'm gonna come and paint the inside of the eye. With some blue or violet, you can paint the whole eyeball. And remember, we passed a little pink in. You can connect the two colors together. And the same thing in the corner of the eye, you can bring a little bit of a pink, and then another, bring a little pink. And for a lower eyelid, we're gonna bring a little bit more warmth to it and bring a little bit more pink and yellow ochre. So, especially on the front plane of this eyelid and the plane that kind of turns into the right hand facing plane that is in shadow. And so we created a little space to place the eye. So now I'm gonna put a little tear dark with a little more color, a little more darkness. And now I'm gonna put my eye, my pupil, and so just find the right placement, attach it to my eyelash line, and paint in the shape that I see. You know, don't think that this is a sphere you're painting. that sphere is interrupted by your upper eyelid and the lower eyelid. So you'll never really see a roundings from all the sides unless the eyes are looking up. Now with the darker value, we can put a little bit more definition of the pupil inside. And now with the skewer, we can take a little piece of light blue or violet white and just really notice where it is, how close it is, and place that little highlight. And because that their eyes are semi-transparent, the light that comes and leaves the highlight moves inside and comes out on another side, on the diagonally opposite side of that eye, and leaves a little bit of what I call exit light. So you can bring a little bit of that warmer exit light. Now, there is many ways of painting the eye. This is just one of them. If you used to a different way, I just wanted you to try something new and to really notice that, our prejudice of thinking that, for example, the eyelash is always fully defined all the way on the top is not really true. It's interrupted. We see the darkest truly is in this corner of the eye, and it really just almost disappears on this side. And then if we take a little bit more light and put on the next to the highlight on the low eyelid, will create a thickness of the low eyelid by identifying the highlight in this area. So with a little bit more pink, you can go back and get a corner, but it's never as bright or as defined as the highlight that is close to the eye, of the pupil of the eye, simply because of the contrast and because this area of the low eyelid is protruding the most forward in that place. After that, it's moving back and it's moving back on both sides. So we can put a little bit of more pink to the corner here to define, and we can put a little bit more pink or warmth to this corner to hold that light and get that. And then we can bring a little bit stronger dark in the tear dark of that eye, place that. And that is why this part of the eye can be more open, because we have a closure where with a tear dot, soften the edge of it, and then bring a little bit more yellow into the white. And find the flatter plane right next to the tear dot. Oh, mine is too big. Smaller. And then draw that light a little bit up. a little bit up, but not too far, because this is a shadow. This part of the eyeball is in shadow, even though it's quite bleached out. And this is also a shadow caused by the breach of the nose. And because this is not a sharp edge but a rounded form, don't let that edge become too sharp. You can open up a little passage of this light inside. Okay. And so this is just one more way to paint the eye, and it's kind of a fun way to do it. Let's bring a little bit more intensity of that division here, and then really kind of a soften a little bit on the back, so the line is moving back and it becomes less visible. And then we can bring a little bit warmer, more orangey red as a reflective light into this plane right here. And the reason why, because we have quite a light on the bottom plane here that serves as a light source to put more light there. And we can just slightly add a little more gray or violet color to that underplane, and just be mindful of every line that you use, and try to connect that line to more of the volume. So the less linear your painting is, the more painterly it will look. So whenever you see that you have gotten a line in your painting, see how you can connect it into the rest of the painting or the elements next to it and make it the value. So you're separating things by value. So that pink right now is too pink. So I'm gonna, and that's too yellow. Just have to find my coloration. And then just putting more light here and more light here, coming and kind of coming across. Okay. And then we're going to use a little bit more color connecting to the nose and coming around that plane, holding that plane, and then even a little bit more warmer but lighter value coming around the cheekbone and floating down right here, more color. So the area here becomes more colorless around the eyes, and the most protruded area of the cheekbone right here becomes the most colorful and the warmest. I'm going to exaggerate it for the sake of this demonstration. You can see how that little blue that I put before becomes almost underpainting for the tones and the colors that I put on top of it. And then I'm gonna come with the darker background or the hair value and just trim that a little bit. And I like to go slightly more with my light, so when I trim it down, the edge becomes softer. Okay. I just noticed that I could go a little bit and just around the eyeball, bring a little bit more light. And the opposite side, of course, is in much less light, so it's warmer, more, less defined, softer edge, all of that. And then I just, when I put that light right here, it kind of got my tear dark a little bit washed away, and that light got a little bit too far. So I'm gonna come back, and then I'm gonna cut a little bit into the light of that nose for just slightly more tilt. And then I'm gonna add a tiny more pink right at the warmer base of the nose. And maybe a little bit more lighter pink right in that triangle, just in the beginning. And come back and just slightly push in the color here. To feel the cast shadow, the darker dark. Here. Oh, let me see. Oh, sorry, this is kind of a details, and I might have come too close to the camera. Please excuse whatever got in the way. Okay, let's move. There's a couple things that we can do here. We can move across to the other eye and then to the bone and then follow down. I think that makes sense. So let's repeat this, what we just did with one eye, and just kind of paint the symmetry of the face, so it moves along evenly. So again, I'm gonna take a little bit bigger brush for bigger planes, mix a little bit more yellow ochre into my mixture, and maybe even add a tiny bit more cadmium yellow deep, make it a little more yellow, and then bring a little bit more cad red light into that mixture, and paint the left hand side plane of that upper arch, and even a little bit darker next to the eyebrow, and come in and meet with the shadow, and then maybe introduce a tiny bit of green as I meet that edge of the shadow. Move along. And then I'll do the eyelid is pretty much the same. It's almost like it's one unit. just got myself into a little bit, come to the shadow shape, soften the edge here. Okay. And then maybe change to just slightly smaller brush. And in fact, let's, I'll take my flat brush, take a little bit of transparent red oxide and mark the space for my eyelash line. And then bring a little bit of a warmer pink all across, and this is a very shadowy place. Okay, kind of creating the bowl, then maybe bring a little bit of a blue or gray coloration right in the middle of that, and then bring a little bit more pink to the end of that spectrum, to the corner of the eye. Reinforced just slightly the darkness of my eyelash on the top, and from there I'm gonna bring, in fact I'm gonna add a little bit of that here. I'm gonna kind of let's mark the tear duct first, because that's gonna help us with the beginning of the eye to find the placement of it. Slightly too dark, that's okay. We can come back to it and bring a little bit more light into it. And then we just take a little bit of a gray for there and bring their eye. So this is important because where we're placing is how she's gonna look, where she's gonna look. Okay, somewhere here. So have to match the two eyes in a way, yeah, so they are open in the same way. Okay, and so one eye is not lower than the other. Take your time, find the placement. Bring it down, and then with a little bit of warmth, I'm gonna find the upper eyelid somewhere here. I hope I'm not going too high, and if I am, I will have to bring a little bit more down. And down. Flatten this curve. Move the eye slightly to the side, a little more. Bring a little bit of definition of the side of it. And I always look at my first eye when I paint my second eye. So if they're not matching, I have to make sure that I'll find a way to match the two. And then Let's just go with a little bit of a highlight. That highlight is less defined, but it is sitting under the eyelashes. And it does have a reflective light or exit light, not reflective, on the diagonally opposite of that highlight. And then we can come back and put a little bit darker iris in. So it's like one place moving another. Let's bring a little bit more white and pink to create the thickness for the low eyelid, and that's gonna cut a little bit on the size of that eye. So from the bottom, a little more. Cutting slightly and bringing a little bit more light. Okay, moving that eye slightly, getting a little bit more pinker, and holding that light if we need to slightly bring it up. And around. And then soften that upper line just a little bit with your brush. Bring this slightly up. Okay. Bring a little bit of a warmer cast shadow from upper eyelid to the corner of the eye. And a little bit of a more defined tear dark shadow. And right here in the eyeball, because this is a light and that's light, you can just truly wash out this edge more and not have a very defined edge. It's like an opening, a little bit of a door open right here. And the light coming and defining the tear dark with a little bit of a highlight of the thickness of the skin and a little bit the highlight of that flat plane, just like on the opposite side, and a little bit of the highlight on the top, on the very top of that heel of the upper eyelid. And then moving into the shadow in a very slow pace. And then let's reconsider the intensity of the color in our eyebrow. It's too red. Doesn't need to be as warm, so we can come with a little bit more greenish, yellow ochreish, especially on the top of the eyebrow. And again, because they're surrounded by light, we don't need to be as dark as they appear. It's more of an illusion because of the contrast. Okay, and as the thickness of the eyelid moves back, it becomes warmer and a little less. So maybe just a little. Moving this slightly back. Okay. I put a little bit of a gray blue to hold that thickness of eyelid. And then I'm also going to come back and reinforce just slightly that division, that crease between the arch and the upper eyelid, and repeat my highlight a little bit stronger. And that highlight has to be in the same line as the highlight on the pupil and the highlight on the lower eyelid. So those symbolize the most protruded areas on the structure of that eye, and probably some of the sharp edges relative to all the other edges. Okay, just kind of a moving along, and we're gonna attach a little bit more lighter pink to the base of that low eyelid, and then get a little bit of violet mixing with pink, and get a little bit of a separation this way, and moving into the shadow, softer movement of the shadow edge in. And this edge between the light and the shadow maybe just it has a little more tilt and a little more transition. So I just want to take the eye from the edge. Yeah, I definitely picked up titanium because I'm washing away my darks. Okay. And I can bring a little bit more light on the top here. Bring that to more light and warm that light with a little bit of pink and move that a little bit across, and even cut into eyebrow here in the corner and bring this into that plane. Okay, and then take a little bit of our background, which is yellow ochre and a little bit of green, and mix it into my skin tone and move that color a little more pink into it, red. Move that towards my shadow shape. Like such. Okay. Let me see if I can remix a little bit of my shadow shape, because I need to slightly darken this plane, the bottom plane facing down. The side plane, and maybe just lower this slightly down. Okay. And double check how am I doing with this, and a little bit high here. So just always being, aware of the shape so we don't lose them as the painting comes. And then later on we can also come and soften the edges and bring reflective light, like what I'm doing now in terms of edge work. And then eventually we would lose some of them. But in the beginning, your shadows, and not just in the beginning, at any time, your shadows is a structure for your portrait. Your light is a flow. So if you lose the structure, you might lose too much of a definition. So let's try to keep the flow going, but yet hold on for our structure. Let's bring a little bit of violet pink into that eye, and we already have some blue in there as we brought it in before we started to paint. And then we'll come back again to the flow, painting the flow. So I'll switch to the bigger brush. Now this side of the cheek is surrounded by shadow, and so it will appear that the light on that cheek is less. And it is less because it's further away from a light source, and the light had to travel through the nose to get there. So it's very slightly less, but not drastically less. Otherwise, they're going to feel like they're coming from a different lightning conditions. Yeah. So all is paint in the relationship, what you already established. Nothing exists on its own space and place. It's all related to each other. Okay, moved a little too fast for my own good. Let's bring a little more yellow and red and a tiny of green. And what I'd like to do is bring transition between shadow and light into that corner without taking too much space for that transition. I place it next to my shadow shape. And that's that. With the same transition, I think I'm gonna add a little bit into the reflective light on the nostril. Open that up. In. And then keep my right hand side plane of the nostril in dark, and then the bottom plane of the nostril is also receiving reflective light. So I'm gonna put that reflective light into that shadow, connecting a little bit of the light on the end of the nose to the hook of the nose and leaving the shadow of the nostril to be the darkest place in that, the darkest depth of that. And this side of the plane. Okay. So we're starting to walk on the plane of the nose, and then we transition into the mouthpiece. So it really does take time to paint the portrait, but the main thing I like to kind of demonstrate the way I think about the portrait and the concepts that I use in my decision making. So one of them is using the color as space building element, knowing that the warm color comes forward. Any places that are protruding forward receive a little bit more warmth. So the cheekbones here, the top, the most protruded part of the nose, the end of the nose, receiving more warmer color. The arch of the eyebrows receiving more color relative to non-color of the forehead that goes back. The chin of the box here receiving a little bit more color. So this diamond shape of the frontal planes of the most protruded areas of the portrait receiving more warmer color, and then the side planes receiving cool colors, often the colors that are connected to the background. So the background, if we introduce the background color to the side planes, then we connect the side planes to the background and they move towards the back. Cast shadow under the nose, connecting to the darkness of the nostril. So we're creating a space and then we carve out the nostril itself, and then we bring a little bit of a reflective light, if we want, on the top of the nostril, or we choose not to bring that light and just leave that design even simpler. But that's one way of doing it. And then carve out a little bit of the top of the nostrils by putting a little bit of the shadow there and keeping the side plane of the nostrils a little more, less colorful, more neutral, a little bit more green. Again, just like what we said, towards the background. Okay, cutting that little depth. And then, of course, using the highlight to push out the most protruded corner towards the light, that is face towards the light. So highlights are very important tools of building the space because they catch the corner and they receive the brightest light. And if you put your highlight in the right space, you can divide the plane into two planes by finding the corners. So you can keep one value going for much longer, but separate that value by simply indicating the corner of one merging into the another. And notice how the edge, the light edge of that nose is lost. And where we're gonna really pull out that nose is by putting the light, even more light, and that light on the upper lip, the piece, the mouth piece, many call this muzzle, is a little more yellow coloration and not pink. So that's how we're gonna differentiate this from the cheeks, is by lessening the pink color and adding a little bit more yellow coloration. And right now this is a time to sculpt around the nose and sculpt the M shape of the lips by painting the top of them. And then we're coming to the side of the cheek, and the side of the cheek is not as pink, a little bit more warmer, yellow again. So we really reserve that pink to the cheekbone to be pushed forward the most. And as the plane of the face going down and side, so it's going down and becoming more side plane, we introducing more gray, more green, more violet, depending on what your color harmony of that portrait is. For me, I think it will be kind of a greenish yellow, because my background is greenish, and that's how I'm gonna bring this kind of a green in here and a green in here on the bottom. Maybe I can do it a little bit warmer. Bring a little bit of orange into that green, and just so it doesn't get too greeny and sickly looking, but so it's a balance between the warm and the cool. But as the chin box moves to its side and meeting the shadow of the chin on the bottom plane, it becomes greener. And then the chin that comes forward has a little more pink. And more light, has a little more flatness on the top. Okay, let's bring a little bit of our shadow shape to just flatten the plane of the chin right here, and then create the corner. Okay, and before we go further, we're just gonna grab a little bit of our background and cut the light slightly more right here. And the way I cut it, I push my brush into the light and pull it out, and it leaves a little bit of a hair pulling into the background, and that just invisibly softens that edge, because we don't want but too many sharp edges in our forms. We are made from flesh, and the hard edges in the portrait belong to some of the cast shadows or to the shadows that fall on the bone of the face and have hardness to them. So coming back to the nose, as we speak about the edges, this edge can become just slightly soft and not so linear. So if I just kind of pat it down without, moving it away. Yeah. Okay, right here. And like that. The hook of the nose here. The exit of this nostrils is very translucent, so I'm adding a little bit more orange to it so it feels warmer. And then let's just come around and paint the other side of the mouthpiece, the curving, the roundness of that coming down around the shadow. Okay, and then with light flowing back into it like this, connecting to the cheekbone, and then with a little bit more gray violet, it's connecting itself, or green or violet, a warmer green, we can connect this to our shadow shape and bring that around into the shadow shape and soften the edge here. So here it's just not a lot of paint, just lessening the pressure of the paint because it's not as dark. And then before we get much further, let's come back and finish painting the lips. I'm gonna just slightly pull that shadow slightly lower. This is, I'm pulling it down, but I'm also, okay, like that. Okay, let's paint the lips, and again, we'll take first and bring a darkness of them first to the upper lip right here on the right hand side. Doesn't receive much of a light. And then the corner of that lip, and then I just paint a straight line across. In fact, I'm just gonna paint the whole thing as one value, and then connect it to the corner and to the side plane and under plane of that lip. Okay, something like that. And then I'm gonna take just cadmium red light, for example, mix it with white, even add a little bit yellow. I want that color to be close to my skin tone as possible. And then I'm gonna flow Let me try what that looks like. And I'm gonna kind of design the low lip by just simply pushing the light across into that shadow, and also by opening up the edges here. Just have no edges, and then come in with reflective light and bring it. So this light is a result of the light that falls on the low lip reflecting into the upper lip, so it can reflect. But it's also a result of this light on the top of it falling down into it. So there is almost a washed out edge between the two lights. And then on the other side of that is a light coming through it. That's a warmer light, translucent light. Okay. And try not to harden the edges so it doesn't look like a lipstick, but rather like a skin. So here is a broken edge. And then we'll gather a little bit more green, and then we'll find the highlight on the corner, and that's how we'll find it, the edge of it. And then by placing our highlight on a, again, most protruded place right here, and then we can just slightly colorize a little bit now around it. So I think when we make our edges, the corners of the mouth too dark, we're making it too difficult to merge them back into the light of the skin. So don't put too much color, and don't make them too dark too fast. Kind of hold your dark a little bit more. And also know that some of that dark is a result of the photography trying to find the middle ground, because between the strong contrast of light and dark. So you can definitely reduce some of that contrast and not make the corners of the mouth as dark as they appear. Definitely nothing on the body ever looks black. So remember that this is a malfunction of photography, which we as a painters who use photography as a reference have to be aware and compensate for. So, and I think coming to that, it's definitely, if you do use photography as a reference, and I certainly do that, it's truly a good idea to also paint from life, study paintings, good paintings done from life, to really see and understand the difference, how the air moves through the portrait, how the edges walk, the changes of temperature and the value. I mean, it's observing that and bringing back to seeing that in your photograph. So you end up using your photograph with intention, but not necessarily painting the whole information that's there, because some of it is not correct. Okay, so this edge is definitely looks like too sharp, so I'm gonna go and just vibrate and soften that edge a little bit, make it more painterly. The same thing with the edge of the cast shadow. It's definitely sharper, but the sharpness is a level of degree, meaning if you soften everything else, then your sharpest edge could also have a degree of softness. It doesn't need to be a razor sharp, because I don't think it will ever look right on a body, on a portrait or figure painting. So, and overall, your sharp edges are just a small percentage of your edges. Most of your edges are, in fact, soft, a degree of softer to more softer, and even lost edges. Okay. So that would be something that I do right now, is when I'm moving towards the finishing of my first layer or the finishing of the portrait, is to really look, how many sharp edges I have, which edges can be softened, which edges can remain stronger and harder. And it's partly aesthetic choices as well as choice guided by space relationship or focal point relationship. So if you want to focus your viewers' eyes on something, you will bring a sharper edge to that piece of painting. The spaces that come closer to the viewer will have sharper edges. The spaces that come further away from a viewer will have softer edges. So using space as a concept to solve your edge problems. And the edges in the painting is really a poetry of the painting. That's what makes that portrait look more painterly, more expressive, and have a more poetic view. And if the edges are too sharp, it has a more feeling of graphic, of a different energy altogether. So right now I'm bringing a little more darkness to the color of that. I also want to define the end of the neck a little bit more. Again, I really apologize if at some point I'm blocking my painting with my hand. especially when I have a shorter handle, hand, but eventually I do get out of the way. So please be patient. And let's right now, we pretty much passed through the face. What I'd like to do is come back and apply my biggest highlight on the forehead. So now when all the light is kind of at the movement of the light down is taken care of, I can come and gauge how much highlight do I want to bring on my forehead. And I think that's about that much. And then I'm gonna just slightly lessen the color, the value, by adding a tiny bit more color. And I'm gonna stream it down towards the plane here and the plane here. So building up now, when I see the whole picture coming together, building up thicker paint by thickening my highlights. I'm gonna just add a little bit of a highlight in the corner here and in the corner here. I'm gonna repeat that one in the corner here with more paint. I'm gonna bring a little bit more light in the side plane here, facing the light. I'm gonna just reinforce tiny bit more highlight here, coming down. And the neck is fine. And I'm just gonna bring a little bit more light towards, just slightly cooling it off down the cheekbone here to make the light edge stronger. And I'm gonna bring a little bit more light on the other side here, just this light piece of light coming in. Okay. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of yellow ochre mixed into my light. And I'm gonna move towards the hair and come again right here, a little more color. Maybe even a tiny bit more yellow, since it's a, and move towards this top of the head, moving the light back. So the most intense light will be the light in front, and then as it moves back, it becomes just slightly less. And the same thing here, washed out that edge. We did that a little bit before. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of blue into that yellow, get a little bit of greenish, and then just transition with that into my shadow. Okay. I want to get slightly back to my darkness here. And then where else can I get darker? Maybe a little change that edge to a little bit less linear, more, and bring less light here. And then bring more yellow and just flow the beautiful lock of hair and then losing that lock of hair into the less light and more shadow as it's streaming down. Okay. And then maybe coming back with the light and just hitting the corner of that hair with more highlight and letting it go. And then the question is, do I want to go back to my shadow area and bring a little bit more of a reflective light right here into my shadow? And I'll need to go back to my flat brush because I need to soften that brush stroke back into the shadow. And so that's a choice. If that's something you want to do, you can leave your shadow just dark, or you can come back and bring a little bit of that light reflecting into the jaw and even reflecting slightly into the neck, defining those two things a little bit more. At the same time, maybe darkening the cast shadow under the chin. Here. Okay. And that corner of the chin is in light, so if I cut it with my shadow, it got shorter. So I want to go back and bring it a little bit more into light, yet it does pick up a little bit of a pink as it approaches the shadow. Okay, and then the neck, the light on the neck can become slightly cooler and greener, so it settles back more. So again, if it has a little bit of that reminiscence of the background, it will move towards the background. In fact, I think I need to move a little back of it. That's better. Okay. And then with the light of the hair, I want to come back here and bring a little bit of that light here so I can also soften some of that edge there as well. And then just define a little bit of that hair here. And maybe it is with the edge of the back of the color of the background. If I darken it here, I'm gonna try to darken some of that background, then I can find those edge of the hair. So I'm gonna darken the top of the portrait a little bit more for contrast. Just the edges of that. But not come too close to the hair to make them look very sharp edge or defined. Just a little bit like this. And I still like the texture that came, except that it's probably a little destructive for this part. So I'm gonna slow it down, and then what I can do is just bring a little bit of light, cooler light, behind her as a kind of an air. So the shadow of the warm shadow of the hair is met with the cooler green hair. And then I kind of like that scrapey design on the shoulder. I'm just gonna maybe just place it and leave some of it like this as unfinished piece. And one more thing is when we lighten the reflective light here, some of this wants to also be a little bit lit up. Yeah, that plane maybe even can get some coolness into it. The side plane of the temple, just a little greener, just a little cooler. Moving back. And right here, I could just take a little bit more warmer dark and connect that. Okay. And there is still a lot of smaller things to attend to, but just because it's becoming a very long demonstration and we've reached a pretty good point, I think we'll just say we'll leave this be, and next time we try a new portrait, we'll try to move it even further and make it even better. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. Thank you so much. Oh, found one more little light I could change. It's very hard to say goodbye to painting. I know you understand. Okay, thank you so much.